Hello there, and welcome back to my workshop. Our new project is a slate chalkboard. That's something we wanted to have here in the house for a while. Some place where we can scribble notes and leave messages and lists and that kind of thing. Now I know we have smartphones and we can do that sort of thing with our smartphones, but there's something nostalgic about having a chalkboard where you can just write in your own handwriting notes and messages and things like that. So the first challenge was finding a piece of slate for that purpose. And I thought that might be easy, but it wasn't at all. The reason being that they haven't been making slate chalkboards for quite some time. As far back as the 1930s, they came up with another way of making chalkboards, and that was taking large sheets of steel and putting an enamel coating on it. And very quickly they became the way to do things, and the whole market for slate dropped out. Now we live very close to an area in Pennsylvania called the Slate Belt, and at one time that was the biggest supplier of slate chalkboards in America. So I went up there, and there is a little town called Slatington, yes, Slatington, and they have one quarry left in that town, and I contacted them, and I was put in touch with the 5th generation owner of that quarry. So I told him what I was looking for, and he said, we really don't get demands for that anymore. No one needs that kind of thing. But he said, tell me the dimensions that you want, and I will make for you a piece of slate for your chalkboard. So that's what we did, and a couple weeks later we went up to Slatington, and we purchased this beautiful piece of slate. Nice and dark slate. It measures 20 by 30, it's 3/8 of an inch thick, and it weighs 14 pounds. It's a heavy piece of slate. So now we need to make a frame for it. And I looked at a lot of vintage chalkboards to get some ideas, and they made them in all different sorts of ways. But I want to make mine with mitered corners. There's a miter, of course. Now if you just glue that together, that would be fine for a picture frame. But it's not strong enough for a big heavy piece of slate. So what I'm going to do is this joinery method. And this is what you call a half-lap miter joint. And you can see it has a miter on the face, but inside you have these two overlapping pieces that, when glued together, makes a really, really strong joint. And then on the other side, I'm going to drill a hole and glue in a peg. You won't see it on the front, but that's going to provide structural strength and make that a really good strong joint. Now the choice of species of wood for this project, I thought about ash, possibly cherry, but I have a stash of 3/4 inch highly figured maple from another project I was working on, and all I had to do was just rip it to the width I needed and square it up. So that's what I did. I've got some pictures of me doing that, and when we come back we're going to get to work on our frame. Okay, I've got our lumber milled here and cut to approximate length. They're a little bit longer. But what I did here, I want to show you this. What I do is once I picked my favorite sides and had everything lined up, what I did was I put these triangles on here. So that triangle tells me that this is the top horizontal piece and this is the bottom horizontal piece. And then over here I made another triangle, and this triangle tells me that this is the left side and this is the right side. So with those two triangles, I know the orientation of all four boards here. And when I lay them out, less likely I'm going to make mistakes. And I don't want to make mistakes. So what we're going to do first is lay out this first board here. I'm going to need my glasses. Okay. Now, let's just make our first mark here. This is across the edge. Let's go ahead and do it. You'll see what I think you'll be able to figure out what I'm doing as I go along. Okay. And I'm going to use my square to make the diagonal. Yep. Now that's a whole lot of marks there, but the first thing I need to do is cut this corner off, completely off, for this joint. So that's the next step. Yes, I'm being careful. So you can see I'm very close to the line here, and I'm going to be using my router plane to put me right on the line. See that line there? Mm-hmm. See the pencil line? Oh, yeah. Okay, so I got to clean that up, but that's the first half of that joint. And we have all four corners done. I think it looks great. You can see, I checked it for square, and it's nice and square. Now, it's not glued up yet. And reason being, we have to put a rabbet along the back inside edge of the frame, and that's going to contain our slate in the back. So you see I've marked it with a wheel gauge here. It's going to be 3/8 of an inch deep and also 3/8 of an inch wide. And we're going to plow the edge of this with my plow plane. Now, figured maple is really difficult to work with. Very easy to tear it out, especially when you're working toward a precise line. So there's a couple things you can do, and one of them is have a very sharp plane iron, and the other one is to set it for very, very fine shavings at first, so that you'll have a less chance having it tear out. So we're going to see. I'm a little nervous about it, actually. So let's see here. I want to make sure I've got everything marked properly. Where are my glasses here? Okay. Yes. Already there. And I've got my plow plane. This is set for just, actually the fence is set just shy of this scribed line. Just shy of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to, once we get this down to the proper depth, we're going to come back with my rabbit block plane and just bring it right up onto that line. So fingers crossed, here we go. Okay, I think you saw how I did that. I started with my plow plane and began my rabbit with that. And then I cleaned it up with my rabbit block plane and finally finished it up with my chisel, just chopping out it to final depth that way. And I could do that because that chopped out portion is in the back. You're never going to see that. And the parts you will see are right along here, this edge here and this corner right there. They have to be nice and clean because that's where the slate's going to go. So, if you remember now, the other half, the second half of this joint is not a mirror image of the first. It's a little bit different. And here's the other half right here. You can see it has a 90-degree end on it. And I went ahead and put my rabbit on here. I plowed a continuous rabbit along here. And when you do it that way and you put it together, what you wind up with actually is a little bit of a square hole here. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. That's the exit point of that rabbit. Now that's not a big deal. I can plug that with a square peg and on end grain. You're never going to see that. But there's actually a better way to do this, and I'm going to be doing the better way on my next piece. And that's right here. That's using a stopped rabbit. And this test piece here shows you this beginning and the end of the rabbit here, and then I plowed it out in here, and you can see when it goes together there is no square hole. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be using my router plane to do that because my plow plane can't do a stopped groove. It can only do continuous grooves. So that's the next step. Let me let's see, where are we here? Let me just show you what I have to do here. I've got this board already laid out. And you can see there's my chopped stopping point. And here is my chopped starting point. And I'm going to be using my router plane along here to take the rest of that material out. And we have all of our rabbits done. This is the second of the stopped rabbits. And I think you saw with my router plane, it was rather slow going. But I got it done, and that's the important thing. Nice thing about this router plane is that you can get an accessory fence with it. And with the fence, I can reference the edge of a board, and that means I can make very, very precise grooves and precise rabbits. So nice to have. I think it cost me $25 or less, something like that. And it really does increase the use for this plane. Now, before we go any further, what I want to do, and this is the last thing, I want to put a little detail on here. This looks a little bit too plain to me. So what I'm going to do is put a little bevel along the inside edge of this frame. And I've already done the other three. Let me show you. There it is. It's a subtle bevel on here. You can still see the pencil marks. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to give it a nice shadow line. And I think it's going to give us just a little bit of detail and make it look kind of nice. So we're going to do this last one. And then it's going to be onto the glue up, I promise. So let's get started there. If I can remember how I did this. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see them, but I have little reference lines here penciled on. I don't think you're going to see them, so take my word for it. Half of an inch in and a quarter of an inch down. So I'm going to reference those as I go and try to get that bevel right on. So are you ready?
Yep.
And we have our bevels all done and we're ready for the glue up finally. Okay, let me show you what I have here. I'm using this to clamp. Clamping is very important to get the precise angles. This is made by Marples of England. I don't remember where I got it, but it's precisely made. It's really a saw guide. You can see the saw guide goes in here, and then this holds it at a perfect miter angle. But these surfaces are all carefully machined. So it's very, very precise, and I'm going to be using it as a clamping guide when I glue this up. So you'll see how that goes. So I think I'm all ready here. My glue is hot and ready to go. So I'm going to pour that out, and we're going to get started here. Okay, well that was that. I'm going to give it a good 24 hours to dry, and then I'm going to do the other corner, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to do the last two corners. So we'll make this up as we go. And it's been a couple days, and you saw me do the first joint. I did the other corners the exact same way. So here's the first corner we did, and then I joined these other two boards here with my second corner, and then I join these two halves together. Here's my third corner, and now we're going to do the fourth corner. here we go. All right, we give that another 24 hours to dry, and we're going to have the first look at our frame. And all four corners are ready. Check this out. Good and square, and nice tight joinery there. I'm very, very happy with how that turned out. So that's looking good there. Also, let me show you on the end too. Remember we had through rabbets and also a stop rabbet. And on the through rabbet had a square hole on the end grain, and I have since pegged that with a square peg and then just flush cut it off. You can hardly see that. And also I oriented these joints so that the end grain is on the top edge and the bottom edge and not on the sides where you could more likely see it. So I'm glad I thought about that. So now the next step is going to be making a chalk tray. This board here, it's going to go along the bottom to hold our chalk. And right now it's 5/8 of an inch thick. I thickness planed it down from 3/4 of an inch. And used my scrub plane and also my bench planes to do that. And you can click the link below. I've done this on other projects, so you'll see me doing this on another project. But this one's ready to go. And what we're going to do next is plow a shallow groove along here for the chalk to fit into. Now I'd like to have a round bottom groove, they call that a hollow, but I don't have any molding planes, so I'm going to use my regular plow plane and just do a shallow groove that way, and I'll use my block planes to just knock the edges down a little bit. So that's going to work there. Also, there's a scribed line here. I'm going to rip this to its final width after I plow the groove. It's easier to do it then. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this board. I'm actually going to screw this board onto a piece of scrap wood so that when I clamp it, the clamps are far enough away and I won't hit it with my plane. So that's the next step. Let's get going. And there is our chalk tray. Very simple, like I said, just a groove down the middle and beveled the edges with a block plane and cut it to size. And that's going to work out just fine. Let's have a look at this with the frame. And it's going to go right here like this and be screwed in from the back. So I think that's going to be fine. Now the question is, what kind of finish am I going to use? And I'm going to be using boiled linseed oil. That's a finish I used a little while ago, about 2 years ago, when I made my tool tote. This is a pine tool tote I made. And look at the beautiful color. Look at the grain, how it brings out the grain. And a nice sheen, and it just feels nice to touch. So I think the linseed oil is going to be a perfect finish for this figured maple. So let's get set up to do that. Now I sanded this frame to 400 grit. So it's ready to go. And all you do is just apply it and reapply it as you go, and it soaks in, and then you apply it some more, and you keep doing that for about 30 minutes, and then you wipe it dry. Now, I don't want any oil left on the surface. I want to make this as dry as I can make it. And then I'll let it dry for 3 days, and then I'll apply 2 more coats with a light sanding of 600 grit in between the coats, and then we'll be finished and have a look at it. And 3 coats later, here is our frame. And I really like what that linseed oil does for the pattern of the maple. And it adds nice color. I think it's just beautiful. Now let's look on the back here. I have a French cleat already installed for hanging. And I've got some holes pre-drilled here for the slate clips that are going to hold it in place. And let me show you this here. I've got some pegs. I mentioned this earlier in the show. I pegged these corners. So these lap joints not only have a lot of glue surface to hold it together, but also these pegs to provide structural support. So I think we're ready for assembly here. So let's get going. Here is our slate. And our chalkboard is finally finished. We have our slate in, we've got our chalk tray on, and I think it turned out really nice. But I want to show you something. Look at this knot right here. Originally, I had that oriented along the bottom, and what I was going to do is cover it with my chalk tray. But Jonine said, no, it's an interesting feature. It's unique. Leave it in. So I turned it around, and I put the knot on top. And now this serves as a reminder to me to lighten up just a little bit. So there it is. The Japanese have a philosophy called Wabi-Sabi. And one of the principles of Wabi-Sabi is that there is beauty in imperfection, and that you should include these flaws and things in your work. So there it is. All right, I think it's time to hang this up. Not drop it. There we go. And we have our vintage eraser and a piece of chalk, and it's all ready for its first note. So this concludes our project. We did it in one show, and I'm not sure we're going to do it next time, but we'll try to make it fun for you. So until then, Thank you for stopping by, and
wasn't that great?